Good morning, everybody, and welcome to day two of SequoiaCon. We're so glad that you joined us. My name is Brian Salts-Halcomb, and I spend my days as a facilitator and user experience researcher in technology, which basically just means that I'm pulling stories and insights out of people. When I first met our panelists a few weeks back, I received the honor of watching how easily their rapport sort of flowed and how with just a small prompt, both their wisdom and also kind of their posture of learning really came forward. And so I'm thrilled to bring them to you today. It should be a lot of fun. Our panelists are from Nuview Union School District out of Riverside County, California. It's a rural area east of LA. And I'll do some quick introductions. So we have Superintendent John Huber. John, why don't you say hello?
Good morning, everyone. So happy to be here with you today.
And we have board member Ken French. Ken, you want to say hello?
Hello.
Right, Ken. And then we have Director of Technology, Derek Rouch.
Hello.
So our focus of the panel is simply to examine one district's journey as they seek to integrate AI. And there's some natural advantages for Nuview Union. They're a smaller district. They're surrounded by larger districts, and that lets them be able to experiment. And as I talked with them, there's a lot of familiarity and trust between board, staff, teachers, and parents. Everyone wears many hats, and so the distance between something like teacher education, technology policy, it's pretty easily crossed back and forth in this system. So in many ways, it's really allowed Nuview to be able to experiment and to embrace AI and to share their experiences with us. So as you hear their story, we invite you to reflect on your own systems journey and on what might be the end goals of all of this experimentation. Go ahead and throw comments and questions in the chat. I'll do my best to pause and bring them forward. And with that, let's dig in. So to map Nuview's journey with AI, it sounds like we really need to start in December 2022 with a conversation between Ken and John. John, can I have you start and just describe that conversation?
Sure, yeah, no problem. Ken, as a board member, came to me in December last year and said, hey, what do you know about AI and its applicability in the educational system? And as Brian talked about, when your boss or one of your board members comes to you, right, you have to have some level of trust and vulnerability. And at that time, I knew absolutely nothing. And I was, confident that we would get the answers and get where we needed to be in terms of knowledge. And we're still searching for that. But, Ken talked to me a little bit about AI, and I was quite frankly blown away and saw immediately how quickly this was going to come for us, but also, again, was vulnerable in terms of I didn't know a whole lot, and he is big in technology. He'll call it the bleeding edge of technology. And we just saw this as an opportunity to open a conversation and really look at how we as a school system could begin to embrace AI and also place some guardrails so that there was success for our students and for our staff. So really, I have to give credit to Ken in terms of prodding me as a leader to look more into what can we do to be on the front edge of this, an early adopter instead of trying to be behind the eight ball, so to speak.
Ken, what was your lens on bringing that to Superintendent Huber?
Oh, I was mind blown in November when it first came out, ChatGPT, and I saw what it could do. And as soon as I heard about it, I jumped on and started just toying with it and just kind of coming up with ideas of how I can use it in my business. But then I was like, how could this be used as a school district from a board member's perspective? You want to always make sure your school's on the cutting edge of technology too. So I started looking into it, and the more I looked into it, the more I saw that this is something that's going to possibly change education forever. I had my doubts. I was like, maybe it's just a fad, maybe it'll go away, but I wasn't sure. So that's when I came to John and said, John, have you seen any of this stuff? It's crazy. I said, if this stuff gets in education, I said, this thing can write papers for kids and stuff. And who knows what else it's going to do in the future. And I said, it's just really going to change things. And John was very receptive and very understanding. And we talked about it more and more. And as it started to come out and you started to see it start to get into, education and different fields and stuff, then I was just at that point, I was convinced. I'm like, this isn't going anywhere. More actors are going to come out, such as Google and other companies with their own versions of it. And this is really going to expand. And it's something that we really need to stay on top of and out in front of. So I've just been just pushing our district and our superintendent to stay on top of it. And it's not a big push because he's very interested in himself, and so is Derek, and it's a team effort. And I think we're all on the same page as to how can we implement this into our district.
Is it right to think that the goal at that point was experimentation, or did you have any vision of exactly what it meant to sort of enter into this space?
It was experimentation and understanding. I'll admit my first instinct was fear, you of it, because it's what is it going to do? Are kids going to cheat? Are they going to use it in the wrong ways? So my first instinct was, do we ban this and block it, or do we just let it go and stuff? And that was a discussion we had at one point, but it was more of an understanding of the whole system.
Okay. And so from there, so we're in December 2022, and you've had a year plus of that early experimentation. Derek, I'll have you kind of talk through some of the initiatives that you've tried in that past year.
Yeah, so I came on board after that conversation in the spring, and yeah, hit the ground running. We had some voluntary summer training for staff. So similar to other districts I've been in, where kind of before the school year starts and before teachers have students, districts often have some professional development. And we created an all-day workshop for them that one of the sessions, or like one of the portions of that day, was focused on AI. And at that point, it was more I think, yeah, to echo John and Ken, it was just so mind-blowing and such like a new technology that it was more just let's share the awe than having some like concrete ideas, but like, hey, we all need to play with this because this is going to be moving pretty fast. Then I think the feedback from that was pretty successful, and the teachers saw in the district like, gosh, I could, this could make a pretty big impact this year. So John invited me to speak at our welcome back breakfast. So that's a collection, a convening of all staff that happens sort of to kick off the year. So I gave, just sort of a welcome session on that and really focused on AI there. From there, more, I would say, sort of connecting with teachers who I would say are early adopters with it, and them sharing some of the tools that they've used, and more sort of informal collaboration with teachers. But then John, Ken, and myself saw the need to formalize a little bit of that and started an AI task force in the district. So John helped us collect names of principals, administrative staff, directors, teachers, classified staff, and just really thinking like whole system wide, who are the people maybe most likely to lean into this and to engage. A lot of them are in the room right now or are attending the conference. That's one of the things too, is like, how do we provide professional development for these people? So we've had an AI task force meeting. We're attending this conference. Our second meeting is going to be post-conference. And yeah, really just trying to, from there, okay, so we're starting to get a groundswell of people using this technology. How do we build an actual roadmap and measure the effect to which we're deploying this, and supporting teachers and students and staff, family members, community.
Mm-hmm. Derek, there was a question in the chat about if you ever did any written policy in this task force or exploration.
Yeah, happy to answer that. So as of this point, we have not. So we're a district in California. The California School Board Association helps present like boilerplate policy, a recommended policy for school boards in California. So for sure that's going to come, and we'll probably adopt and adapt it. There's a lot of local control in California, so we'll make that policy our own. So in the long term, board policy level, and Mr. French, you can speak to this better than me. I think it's sort of, hey, let's be really intentional about what we put into board policy and maybe wait for more consensus at the state level. Locally, though, we're actively working on adjusting our acceptable use policy for students and staff to include, it's never had language. So every year as students enroll, they have to sort of accept the terms of technology in the class, and families and staff as well. So yeah, we're looking at adjusting that language. And then if anyone attended Laurel's session yesterday on student data privacy, I'm working on how do we collect parental consent. So for students who are 13 and older, who may be able to actually start using some of these tools in the classroom themselves, they cannot do so without parental consent. So how do we collect that? And that's a document probably, but then also a system on where do we log that, and how do we communicate who has collected that for teachers, and the next steps for, if I'm a teacher with 30 students in my classroom and 20 of them have, their parents have signed consent for these tools and 10 haven't, how do I, creates a little bit of complexity there. So a little bit of a long-winded answer, but.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Derek. So sounds like kind of coming back to our narrative a bit, we have this December conversation, we have this teacher workshop coming into the fall, and then you've experimented with some things this year. It sounded, as we talked, it sounded like really rich initial explorations. But one thing we discussed a lot as a group was this after conversation. And I want to drill into this a little bit more. So Ken, I understand that as you started rolling these out, there was kind of a question on your mind following a workshop about the goals. Will you tell us about that a bit?
Yeah, no, following the workshop that we had, I mean, the workshop was awesome that Derek put on, and everybody participated, and there was lots of, who knows, what ChatGPT is, and who knows how the different ways you can use it, and how are different people using it in different ways and things. But at the end of the meeting, my question is, what is our goal as a district? What is our driving factor? What are we going to do? You have a workshop and everybody gives input, but then does it just stay there? How do you take that input now and make it into an action that really affects our district? And because you had tons of input, you had input from teachers and staff and administrators, and it was all great input, but we all left the room, and I'm thinking, now, what do you do with all of that? We could have 10 of these meetings, and if nothing leaves that room, then what's the purpose of it? So I asked Derek, I said, Derek, what are we going to do? How are we going to make this into an action to where we take this data and we actually make it usable, and this input, make it usable, and put it out there in a way that benefits our district? And that was my main goal, because the more I hear about, all these AI platforms, people are coming up with different ways of using it, but how do you make those into tools that are actually usable for students and staff and things like that? So that's kind of where I went with it at that point.
I want to sink in a bit there. I think this is really interesting. Like we're all on this process of integration, but we're also good educators in the room. What are the metrics of success that are coming behind this? And so we had a really interesting initial conversation about that with the group. Maybe Derek, why don't I throw it back over to you? You sort of had a lens on teacher efficiency. You want to talk about that a bit?
Yeah. So Ken's question was a great one. Hey, cool workshop, but so what afterwards? And I think to the policy question earlier, there were some mile markers that we know will pass it, in a journey towards deeper and more full integration of AI. One of those is, do you have policies? Are you collecting parental consent and things like that? But those are less interesting for us. What we really care about are outcomes. How is this technology being used to improve student outcomes? How are we being used to make teacher? I think what we had talked about during our call is my selfish goal for this, and I think it's shared by leadership. And one thing that makes this just a perfect incubator to explore is not to train teachers and deploy these technologies for the sake of making them more productive. It's not efficiency for the sake of, now you can, be even more efficient, and you've carved out this space in your day so that you can, grade more papers and, craft more lessons or anything like that, to sort of commoditize or make teachers just these like efficiency machines. I think it's more about carving out just breathing room in their lives and hopefully getting back some, everybody has felt, from teachers all the way up to administration, and I think students have felt it too, just the way that the system has just encroached upon their day, right? The standardization of everything, while it has good ends, just really can create so much work in a teacher's life. And a lot of times technology adds to that work. Email creates more things to check and it probably hasn't simplified lives too much. But this felt like something a little bit different, that maybe this is a technological advancement that can start to contract and open up more space in their day when lesson planning takes 5 minutes instead of an hour and a half. That's time that you can, breathe and spend with your family and, just become more of your, whole authentic self, I guess.
John, how are you thinking about this conversation, the end goal?
Yeah, I think, if I could just briefly circle back to just one question,
Yeah.
about policy really early on, is when I started looking into conferences, I went to local conferences, national conference, superintendent conferences. I was finding the same, I was asking that same question, right? And so what is the policy going to be, or what's that going to look like? And what I was hearing was people were afraid to put a policy because it was changing so rapidly, right? And getting out in front of it, and didn't want to just be within this box. And so our end goal, I think, to answer your question is, we certainly want to come up with a way, as Derek talked about, to have our teachers, our staff, our classified people use this as a tool to have a work-life balance. One, there's a lot of research currently out there that talk about how important balance is in professionally, and how you're giving more to your students really by having that balance. I think the end goal is to bring maybe those resistors that are still thinking, hey, this is a detriment to education, or we're teaching kids this tool that maybe is against what we've done in the past. But I think the end goal also is, how do we embrace this and come up with a way that we're measuring our students' success and preparing them for life as in the workforce, being college and career ready, and embracing AI, and looking at skills that aren't necessarily tested right now in our current system, but developing what we call a framework for the future, and getting our students ready for AI and beyond.
Thanks, John. So Ken, how do you've got your superintendent, your director of technology answering your question here of what's the end goal? How's that sit with you, or anything else you'd add?
No, that sits good with me because again, this is rapidly changing. So the end goal is going to be it's fluid. It's going to change as well. We've got to start somewhere. We can't just sit back and wait for to find out what the end goal is going to be. We got to start working with something in a responsible way, and start preparing our staff, our teachers, and our students, and everybody on this stuff. Piggybacking off of what Mr. Huber said, you know, the the bringing the staff on board, so maybe some of the resistors or some of the ones that aren't as interested in it, at least understanding it, because the students are going to use it and they need to understand that and know that. So we need to make sure everybody's at least informed to a certain level, and they can use it more or less, as my opinion, in the classroom or in their daily lives. I don't want to force it on anybody, staff or anybody, but I do want them to have an understanding, because the students will start using it more and more, especially as you get into those higher grades. But ultimately, the direction, I think, is very good that both Derek and Mr. Huber are talking about. I'm happy with that direction. And as things come up and new things come out, we might have to adjust that and stuff. And then going back to what had come up earlier about policies, and that kind of comes in as well. As a board member, when you make policy, it's hard to change a policy once you put it in place. So you do have to be very intentional with that policy, and really think it through. Sometimes you do have to see what the state and county, you don't want to restrict things so much with policy, but you also don't want to be breaking any rules or laws with policy, or by not implementing policy. So it's a very touchy thing you have to do. But no, overall, I'm very happy with the direction our district's going.
And you use a comment of, I don't want to force people, and I think it relates to a question here in the chat. So let me sort of read this out. Pavel said, as a teacher, I'm worried that top-down policies will often ignore teacher opinions and handcuff us more than help. Maybe a cynical perspective, but I would appreciate you guys exploring this idea. I don't know who wants to take that one.
I'd like to start with that one. As a board member for our district, at least, I don't want to force, teachers to use this in the classroom. I don't want to force them to use it in their daily lives. I don't think that that's the right way to go. It needs to be adopted at everybody's own comfort level. It's just more important that they just have an understanding, because if they're not using it, other people are, or the district is, or students are. So just understanding it, but using it, I mean, just within maybe high school uses it more than kindergarten does. It's just not applicable. So you can't really force that on anybody. Teachers need to be their own individuals. They're professionals. They know how to teach their kids. And I respect that. I just think that from a board member's perspective, having an understanding and making it available to the people that want to use it, it's there.
Mm-hmm. John or Derek, any perspective there?
Yeah, I would add for me, just again, fairly candidly, an innovation like this is almost a litmus test as a leader. So, we all respond. Ken responds to the community. John responds to Ken and the board. I respond to John. So having this alignment has been, such a breath of fresh air, because something like this, we can all form fairly strong opinions on, but all three of us in our conversations very early on, we're saying there's no way we're going to, blocklist this stuff. It's, first of all, it's illusionary. People are going to use that as the tech director. What I could do is I could create a policy that doesn't allow certain, OpenAI or Bard or whatever to be accessed on our network or on a student's Chromebook. But the second that a student or staff member get home on their own network or their own device, they can use it for all the things that we're worried about, writing papers or this or that, and also helpful things, of course. But all we would be really doing by creating a sort of a block punitive policy would be really restricting access to only the most privileged students who have a home internet and have home devices that they can access it. So right away, it felt like controlling this. There would be more illusory control than actual control. So it just felt like, I was able to breathe a little more deeply in realizing that we were all in alignment on that, because I think, there's probably a lot of tech directors who see the value of this in other districts, but their superintendent teams or their board teams are maybe more fearful and maybe not early adopters when it comes to technology, and just demand, right? Like that, hey, block list this and this site. And at that point, now you've got, if nothing else, you've got conflict. So totally agree with Pavel on the question that this can feel very punitive if done poorly, and can't answer for other districts, but just really, blessed and thankful for John and Ken's leadership in that regard, and that, that alignment was really important. And I don't think we really were intentional about making sure we were aligned. It just sort of happened organically for us. So that's probably lucky.
John, it looked like you might have had something to add.
No, I'm glad Derek touched on it. I was going to say that equity piece for us was something that was really important. And then, just one thing that I'll comment on, and I agree with the question, is, I think it can take place in small doses, right? In terms of how this can be helpful for you and not necessarily an impediment. And that could come, like I remember Derek teaching very early on to some people who told me, hey, I didn't really believe that AI was a good thing for education. But then after looking or sitting in Derek's session, hey, it can even help me with emailing parents, grade report comments, making my life easier so that I can dive deeper into lesson plans. I know that might go into a rabbit hole a little bit or be a little off topic on the question, but I thought it was important to mention.
Yeah, actually, let's stay there a little bit. We've sort of alluded to these workshops, but I think that was interesting, John, for you to start kind of talking about the content. So we're teaching teachers how to use it in some specific ways? What are some of the other topics that you've really tried to focus on?
Well, I think Derek does a good job, as well as our Ed Services Director, Erica Williams, just kind of putting out surveys to our staff and just saying, what do you want to see? So really that's staff driven, or what's an area that you want more information on? And Derek can put together a quick video and then send it out, or develop lessons, if you will, around those topics. So really that's staff driven in terms of, what it is that they're maybe not feeling quite up to speed on. Derek, you want to jump in with it?
Yeah, sure. I think one of the maybe challenges there is that because this is such a wide open landscape, it's hard to create prescriptive use cases. So, just from the one developing most of the trainings so far, my thought process is more to help seed some like brainstorming ideas. So maybe similar to, I shared a couple of those in the afternoon session yesterday, and it wasn't, at all do this exact lesson. It was just, here's the type of things that are maybe, getting back months of your life instead of minutes of your life, or really helping drive some instructional changes that we wanted to do anyway before AI, but now maybe we can accelerate because just the load of having to build all this content isn't really there when you have a really good content machine behind it. So it's the trainings so far have not been, followed these 3 steps to integrate AI into your classroom. It's much more like idea sessions, I guess, where here's some ways that we can use to solve typical problems, and learn from there. And that's the point of the AI task force too, is not to, a little bit of it is maybe training the staff so we all kind of have our head around the same ideas of where's the landscape at, because it's changing so fast. The first part of our first task force was like, here's probably the 4 most popular tools. Here's their latest release. Here's what they can do. So that there's some sort of stable set there, but it's mostly been, a roundtable of how are you using it so far, and what's been valuable for you, and what's been valuable for you, and what's been valuable for you, so that we can collect it in the group and disseminate it further.
Yeah, what really stands out to me as I hear you talk is some of these values or postures that I think you're kind of coming to as a team. One is this sense of bottom up, not top down. We're really going to invite the opinion and the movement of the people that are in your team. The second I hear is just sort of this fluidity and trying to hold this tension of, we know we need to think about policy or think about integration, but we're also really early and we don't want to like over solidify anything. So I'm hearing those. Are those good characterizations, or would you describe other values that you're trying to bring forward here?
Yeah, I think it's along the lines of what you're saying. Yeah, the values are key. A big part I wanted to piggyback off of what Derek said is sometimes you don't know what you don't know. And as new things are coming out, AI is learning to do things that this week that it couldn't do last week. And we can't expect all of our staff, everybody in our district to learn all of that and to know all that. So professional development for staff, for our IT department, stuff like that, and then bringing back that new stuff, because let's just use a teacher example, doesn't even know that AI can do a certain task, and being able to tell them, hey, it can do this. So they don't know to ask, hey, how do I use it? They don't even know the right questions to ask if they don't know what it can do. So that's going to be key to make sure that that's getting passed down to them as well, because you don't use a tool if you don't know what its capabilities are. And I think that's very important.
Nice. Well, let's flip the table here a bit. I want to think about the flip side of the success that you're having. And in technology, we often use this exercise that we call a pre-mortem, where you're sort of envisioning, if the project fails, what's that look like? And it kind of helps us recenter on where we should be heading. So I want to ask that question to you. What's it look like if this fails? If your experiments in integration fail, lay that out for us a bit.
Yeah. for me, I think, and maybe this is related to the last question, if it becomes just one more implementation on their shoulders. So if now we, we want to promote literacy and we want to promote math and we want to promote reclassification of English learners and we want to promote AI development, like to put it just, there is, this was a really interesting, I forgot we also had a lunch and learn before the task force. And I think it might've been you, Ken, who brought this up, or one of our principals, that to them, AI really had sort of two faces. There was learning about AI, so it could be its own content area, developing AI literacy for students. How do you just like how you prompt Google with more advanced searches than others, how do you use these tools well and effectively so AI can, is essentially its own discipline of knowledge. And then the other one is AI as a technology that cuts across all domains of knowledge. What does AI look like in math and science and literacy and, your personal productivity and so forth. So I think, but there's, both of those are correct. If it just lives in AI as its own domain of knowledge, and now we've, created a bunch of content and a bunch of trainings just so you can get better at that without, any transfer of knowledge and integrating that into real experiences that bring you back minutes in your day that you can spend with your family, or that help make you a more effective educator, or help make you as a student learn more quickly. Because I've experienced on the technology side, I've got experience building websites and developing and stuff like that, but I'm regularly confronted with tech challenges that with AI as a co-pilot, I think I use the example that I'm like a C- programmer, but me plus ChatGPT is like a solid A, and there's very few challenges, that I can't solve. So building up efficacy there, I think, would be the positive. So yeah, if this is something that maybe the flip side to do the pre-mortem, if it made people feel less than like, oh, this is another domain that's maybe I don't have time for, or that feels beyond me, that would just feel like a real miss here, because yeah, that's the last thing anybody needs, right?
Yeah. I was going to say, it's like that this too shall pass, right? We have had many staff say, well, potentially say, not just in our organization, but in other organizations, and not just in education, outside of education. It's like, hey, this paradigm's swinging, and we're just going to hold on for the ride, or we don't need to know this because it's going to shift back the other way. But I think we'd be failing if we look at it that way. We'd be failing our organization. We'd be failing kids, really, in terms of getting them prepared for what's coming there.
That's a great point. And yeah, if this becomes, oh, this is just the hot topic of the day, and I'll just, I'll attend these trainings because I have to, and I can't wait to, go back to the next pendulum swing, to John's point, I think, yeah.
Right. No, for me, it's, Derek said earlier, he's hoping this tool could free up teachers, staff's time, everybody's time, to give them time to breathe. I see it failing if it doesn't give them that time. If it just becomes, well, now AI is doing this for me, so now I have to do more work. I hear every once in a while, from all departments, how busy everybody is, and how different tools being implemented and things. And like you, both of these gentlemen said it, I just don't think, I think it'd be a failure if this is just another tool, but it doesn't free up time. It doesn't make things easier. It's just something else to use. And then on the student side of it, if our students are not coming out with the knowledge of how to use this responsibly, I see that as a failure on our part. AI can make mistakes. It can lead you down a road of telling you what you want to hear versus maybe the truth or what's accurate. So I think teaching students to be able to use it responsibly as a tool, but to get peer reviews on things, to look at other opinions, to ask the correct questions, to be able to get the correct answers out of it. It seems all too often that some of the students and younger generation, they read the first thing they read, and that is fact. And I don't want AI to ever lead them down that road, and of misunderstanding. And I think that would be a part of a failure on our part as a district and as an education system if we're not teaching them how to use it properly.
Yeah, so failure is more about impact on teachers and students. I guess I'm struck it's not the ethical concerns or privacy concerns that are the top of the list.
As Mr. French was speaking, I thought about that too. It's like actually like very pragmatically, a failure is, from the tech side, a data breach, or, some identifiable information now entering a training system, or, a student who is using it in class without their parents' consent. So, an angry email from a parent on how did this sort of slip through the cracks. There are some like very pragmatic failure points that I think as well, but yeah, it helped, Ken helped illuminate those. I was like, yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah. No, and those are very important topics. I think that's there is a lot of focus on that. I think there's less focus on the stuff that I was just mentioning. Not that it's not important, but I think there are a lot of people looking at the ethical concerns, the safety concerns, the data concerns. When I attended some of the breakout rooms yesterday, I heard lots of talk about that and stuff, and that is definitely a high priority as well. You can't just take students, grades and everything and throw it in there and have it print out an email to a parent. It's not necessarily the safest thing to do. But as from a board member's perspective, my responsibility is the kids and to make sure they're successful and safe. And so I keep looking at, how do we use this to make them successful as well. And I know Derek is working hard on making sure the safe part is taken care of.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, AI is bringing a shift in how we think about relation and humanity, right? And I like that there is a practical policy part of that, but there's also a couching of that in very human terms of, how does this really impact the lives of the people that we meet? And so, yeah, I appreciate the way that you talked about that. Parents came up at one point here, and I wonder if you want to discuss a bit. Derek, you have a parent night that either just happened or is coming up. Talk
Yeah,
to us about your thought process there.
sure. We've been doing a parent workshop or workshop series throughout the year, and we train parents on our student information system and some of the student safety tools that we've had. Those have been in person and so far pretty sparsely attended, but we're testing two things. We're introducing the topic of AI for parents, and really interested there on just what I feel like I've got a pretty good sense of our staff readiness with what AI is and knowledge about AI, but wondering, how exposed our families have been, because, they're coming from a lot of different backgrounds and job experiences and stuff where I don't know the extent to which it's deployed in other industries. Education, it's pretty widely adopted, and there's a large conversation. I don't know what that conversation looks like in accounting firms and whatever, where our parents work. So yeah, it'll be really interesting to hear about that. And then that's also we're going to be testing that through Zoom too, to see, hey, maybe if we aren't asking parents to kind of come to our boardroom for that, if we can, share a session like this through Zoom, can we, reach more families? But it just feels really, really important to give them that same sort of level set about here's what it is. If you've never seen it, let's look at some examples. Here's our fears as educators, maybe, and how you can come along as kind of supports in that relationship, but then also, really spending most of our time focusing on here's the promise that we think it offers and how you can help use this as a personal tutor for your students, and how if you're, working on, you can use it for, you have a difficult conversation with your son or daughter that you want to have, maybe type up your thoughts in GPT first and get some feedback on that and just some positive aspects as well.
John, I wonder if you would reflect a bit on trade-offs. Like you're putting a lot of new energy here with parents when you could be talking about other things, energy here with staff when you could be talking about other things. I'm curious how you've thought about that and anything that you need to give up to put the additional energy here.
Yeah, I mean, we've had obviously some task force meetings, a lot of conversation around it, like what does this look like? And so, time is not infinite. And to your point, there have been some trade-offs and right now, but I think so for example, as we're having conversations around this, or I'm trying to go out and look for, policy or ideas or professional development. I suppose what is I'm not spending as much time in the classroom instructionally supporting our teachers, supporting our classified staff, supporting our administrators, and that's important work for us all. Whether you're an administrator here in this conference, or a support staff, or a classroom teacher, the work still happens in the classroom, and that's the most important work that we do. And one of the biggest joys of my job is getting in and trying to support how that is taking place, and what are our next steps, and how can we get better. And so that hasn't been as much there hasn't been as much time spent there, so that's been a trade-off. But I think it's going to be a trade-off that's well worth it if the ends if it ends up where I think it will end up, right? If it ends up in terms of what Derek or Ken are highlighting, making it more efficient for our teachers, our support staff, making it easier, preparing our students, then the trade-off is well worth it. And so, yeah, that has been a sacrifice. And that's something that just like I'm sure every administrator here loves getting into classrooms and gets joy out of that, and it re-energizes you. That's been a trade-off for us. But I think, you're trying to see the end game. It's a trade-off that we hope is well worth it.
Any thoughts on how we'll know? How will we measure if that impact happened on teachers and students?
That's where I'm going to rely on Derek. You hire great people and you get out of the way, right? That's like, I'm a former HR person, and he's going to come up with all sorts of metrics, and whether it's on professional development or things of that nature. And I can tell you that we are developing, I alluded to our framework for the future a little bit ago. We are developing a framework for the future where we're looking at metrics in certain grades, third grade, sixth grade, eighth grade, and 12th grade, where for the past year and a half, we've been, as technology has been changing, we're changing what we're looking for in our future student. And we're coming up with, and that's when I say we, it's a big group of, again, all of our employee groups of parents have been invited to that. Like, what does success look like in those grades, and how are we measuring? What benchmarks are we coming up with? So we're in the middle of that process, and we hope to have that very firmed up by the end of this year, so that we advertise to our parents, we advertise to our community, we advertise to our staff, really, here are the benchmarks in certain areas, and technology will be included in those benchmarks, as well as other life skills, being a collaborator, a communicator, a critical thinker, those types of things.
I love your phrase of hiring great people and getting out of the way. It's really clear that there's something complementary going on between the three of you and the rest of your team. Could you put a little bit more words around that? How do you think about the role of superintendent versus board versus director of technology in rolling out AI?
I think it's important to have everybody involved, to be honest with you, because you got three different perspectives there. You're looking at different things. I think our task force is even more integral, because you're getting even more perspectives. And I think you need to see all of those perspectives and have people that are not so stuck on their idea or their way, or they think what they're saying is right. I think it's more important to listen to all of them and try to say, how do we make all of it work together? Myself, I think that's very important.
Yeah, I think, I've witnessed John be pretty intentional on who he got into the room for the task force. So it has our director of human resources, and, not putting thoughts in his mouth, but it might be there. He needs to be there so that he can know that we're not asking people to work outside. You know, we're not adding bullet points to job descriptions that aren't there and haven't been collectively bargained. And our director of ed services and a director of special education and student support services, so they can get the lens on what does this look like in IEPs and the legality around, hey, probably okay to help prompt some goal writing here. Definitely not okay if you're uploading student information or the like. And for ed services, what's our larger picture for curriculum and academic achievement, and how does this fold into that? So yeah, really important. I think we're blessed to be a small district and maybe a little more agile that way, because larger districts, you just have a much more carved out roles where I'm a tech director that can work on the policy side and the repair side, but then also gets to lead professional development. I think a lot of larger districts, those are 3 separate roles maybe, but yeah, we're maybe a little bit fortunate there to be a little agile.
So I want to just address the audience for a minute. So we're about 10 minutes from the end of our session. I'd love for you to put any questions or thoughts in the chat as you've listened to our panelists. And maybe I'll just shift to a little bit more of the creative or idea space. You want to talk about some of the best ideas or examples that you've seen start to come out of this work this past year. Ken, maybe I'll have you kick off. You have some just fun GPTs that you've built yourself. You want to chat about that?
I created a couple of just fun GPTs just to play around with it and stuff. As a board member, you have to follow Robert's Rules of Orders and in the Brown Act. So I created a GBT called Robert Brown and put in, the Brown in there and some links to Robert's Rules of Order. So that way it can get me some factual information during a board meeting. I thought that was kind of fun. I created a compassionate sage GBT to ask compassion questions and just get some ideas, but just to have some fun with it and use the tools to be able to see, pull more direct information and see how it works, and especially when it's applicable to your job as a board member, and be able to look up whether or not something's a Brown Act violation or whether something should be done through a certain way through Robert's Rules of Order real quick. You can ask those questions. It's going to give you the answer, and they're useful little tools, but they're fun tools, and they're fun ways to use the system and creative ways to use it. So
others?
Yeah, some of my favorite when I get to put on my training hat and think about how I would use this in the classroom. Thinking about some of the activities I shared yesterday with sticky math and 2 themes in a lie or things like that are pretty fun. But 90% of my work with ChatGPT isn't sexy at all, and it's just debugging Python code or helping me, try to automate this or that process. And I get a lot of enjoyment out of that, but I know that's not for everybody. So,
and how about from your teachers or your principals as you've done some of this initial staff training? What are some light bulbs that you've seen go off?
Well, I think for us, our administrative team, or some of our administrative team, was just as clueless as I was regarding ChatGPT when we had this conversation a year ago, and I think they're using it as a tool to open a lot of more communication. I'll choose one. I'll pick on one middle school principal that we have who, would be the first to admit, hey, I don't know what this is, and spent a lot of time with Ken, and then was just blown away on how it could make his life easier. And so, and when he models that and he models that vulnerability, I think it gets teachers saying, okay, he's using this. He'd never, I wouldn't say never, I wouldn't say his biggest strength was sending out communications to school community, but it's a starting point now for him, and then he'll adjust it to make it him. You don't want to make it ChatGPT and that's the communicator out. But I think it's neat to see our principals even embracing how this can help make their lives easier, and how this can communicate, open lines of communication with parents. with really no additional time or very limited additional time, or perhaps even saving time.
Yeah, I was going to add to that. I think it's fun to see people that aren't as far into technology. John said at the very beginning that I try to stay on the bleeding edge of technology, not the cutting edge. I want to be out there in front of everything. That's part of my business outside of the school board. But that being said, it's neat to see people that aren't there see this for the first time, and the surprise and the enjoyment and the wonder on their face of, wow, look at what this thing can do. And then some people want to start using it for different tools and things. And I think that's really exciting to see.
I would just add that just that question has helped me think of ways that, like, gosh, I could be better at collecting that feedback from teachers, like in a more, like, how do we build the database of, interdistrict, but, even maybe throughout Riverside County of, what are some really great use cases for this in a first grade classroom, or talking about California missions with elementary students. And then, yeah, we've got, I'm sure every district around has a newsletter, and we have one as well. And I could see just what you've got staff spotlights, student spotlights, whatever, but there could be a section of prompt of the week or something that, just a way to sort of spread that information and gather it. That'd be.
Mhm. Yeah,
One of
that's
the
an interesting connection to some of those values we talked about at the beginning, where you're really inviting people to experiment personally, and to do their own exploration here. But yeah, how do you then raise that up to some community awareness that can start to see some real fruit of that collaboration?
Yeah.
John, your
Oh,
research.
I was just going to say that somewhere when I was, in a past life teaching middle school math, I remember working on a lesson plan that night and thinking, gosh, there's thousands of, seventh grade math teachers who are working on this exact same lesson plan right now. And, there wasn't really the tools at the time, teachers pay teachers or other ways to sort of share the best of the best, but building that would be just incredibly valuable, I think.
Well, let's just sort of let's wrap up with last words. Again, participants in the audience, if you have a final question, go ahead and throw it in the chat, and I'll just turn it back over to our panelists as you think about where you go next. What's top of mind?
For me, I'm just excited to see where we go next with this. I'm excited to see how it's implemented. It's changing so rapidly that just in the past year, or just since ChatGPT came out, now you have Google Bard in the game, or actually it's Gemini now. They've changed it in the game, and they're integrating it. I just recently saw that Adobe is integrating it. You got it's I think evolution. What we're looking at today is not going to be the same next year on this day, and 2 years from now, it's going to be totally different. So, I mean, it could slow down. I could be wrong, but I really see a lot of change. And I think it's important. I think our students of today, especially our lower level grades, are going to have a different future than what I grew up with. And I think it's important not just to, it's always important to educate them in math and the sciences and the literature, but it's also important now to educate them in this technology, because it's going to be part of their future jobs, and just shopping and everything they do. And we need to be part of that and help them learn how to use it responsibly. And I think that's very important.
Well said. John, as you answer, there's a question in the chat of what would be your plea to other superintendents?
Oh, wow. I had another answer prepared, and now you threw me off my game there. I think it actually ties in, and that is really, we have to embrace this, and we have to spotlight, right? And so one of the goals that I'd really like to have moving forward for us is, how do we spotlight the good things that we're doing around this work to our school community? We don't always get a chance to tell our own story. And I think it's pretty easy to do it with AI and spotlighting some of those awesome things that are going on in our classrooms. And so really my goal is to try to look at telling our story and how we're embracing this and how it's meaningful for our students. And I would encourage, superintendents to do that as well, in whatever way, fashion or fashion you can.
And Derek, how about next goal with the AI task force and top of mind for you?
Yeah, I think for me, education is just so wrought with lagging metrics. To John's point about metrics earlier, you know, every indicator we have is once every year you get your attendance data and your student performance and you know your EL classification rates or whatever. And just thinking about almost like a logic model, you know, so our big picture goal, let's just label that, you know, meaningful integration or whatever, right? We want to integrate this thoughtfully and well and systematically. How will we know that? What does that look like for our, you know, for teachers, for students, for our administrative staff, for classified personnel? And then what are some maybe leading indicators that we'll know? So maybe that's building surveys, you know, that we send out on how have you know, used this or that, or to what extent. That's where I'm a little fuzzier, but if we can just get to that tier with the task force and have them start to come up with like, what does good implementation look like for those users or those you know, audiences, then the step after that, you know, I feel like I've got a great step 3, which is start to develop the training and the content and the resources to support that. But that's step 2 of, you know, what targets are we aiming for here with our different audiences? If we could just get a little clarity around that, that could be really, really useful. And then we could really mobilize people on, you know, okay, now we're going to try to activate community and get them to here, and we'll know we've done it by X, Y, and Z.
Yeah, well said. Thank you for sharing your journey with us, past and where you're looking in the future. As participants leave here, I'm going to put up on the screen the feedback survey. Please take a couple minutes to complete that and let us know what you thought of this session. And best wishes, Nuview Union. Thanks so much for sharing with us.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much.